Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to get started very soon. My name is Shivani Kanabiran. I'm with the OECD. It's a very large room, and so I would invite everybody to come forward. It's rather disconcerting to see me, I feel I have to shout to be heard, which I know is not true, but yes, thank you. So, folks, if you would just, especially those sitting at the back, please come forward. My eyesight is very poor, so it's very helpful to have you come forward so I can actually see who's in the room. And we will get started in a few minutes. This is the session on due diligence in agricultural, in food and agricultural supply chains. So thank you. We'll take a few minutes, and I'm just going to check with the organizers because I understand this will be webcast, which suggests that we need to start at a certain time. We have a very exciting panel today. We've got a number of very, very experienced and knowledgeable speakers. So I think we're going to have a very good panel. And again, please, welcome to this session, and I would please invite you to take one of the front seats. We won't bite, so... Or we won't bite hard, says Mr. Blake. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the afternoon set of sessions. This session is the due diligence in global supply chains, food and agriculture. My name is Shivani Kanabiran. I'm with the OECD. I've worked with the OECD for a number of years now, primarily, exclusively in the area of supply chain due diligence. I've been at the OECD since 2012. Started originally working in the minerals value chain, and then quite recently moved to looking at due diligence in the agricultural supply chain. We have an expertise on supply chain due diligence in the agricultural sector, what works, what remains a challenge. As far as possible, we're really going to use examples and experiences that they've lived through themselves. So I hope that we will have a very fruitful discussion. There's going to be an opportunity for you as the audience to ask questions, to provide comments. But I would say you're welcome to make a comment. Please introduce yourself before you make your comment. But use the time as well to ask our panelists questions, because I think it's a great opportunity. You don't very often have such a group on stage. And so who do we have on stage? We have Dr. Namakon from the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperative. She works a lot on standards development. We have Bruce Blakeman from Cargill. We have Prad Ketpahosh from Thai Union. Jon Wis from Nestle. And we have Sandra Kossat, who's Executive Director with Sherpa. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to just set the scene a little bit about the agricultural sector and due diligence. And then I will spend a bit of time introducing each of the panelists and asking them a set of questions. We'll have about a good hour of a discussion. And then we'll turn it over to you for your questions before we wrap up at the end of the session. Now, food and agriculture is really at the heart of civilization and prosperity. I think all of you will agree with that. Yet agriculture faces a number of challenges, multiple challenges. What do we know? We know the world population is expected to reach 9 billion by 2050, so this means we need to produce more food. At the same time, we know we need to produce food that's more nutritious. We've got limited natural resources, that's land, water. There's soil degradation. We've got the issues of climate change, water scarcity, changing lifestyles, so more protein-intensive diets. Nearly all of the SDGs are linked either directly or indirectly to the sector, the global food system, right? We also know that there's a big opportunity here. The Business and Sustainable Development Commission in 2017 estimated that sustainable business models and innovation could open economic opportunities of nearly 2.3 trillion, just in the food and ag sector. In Thailand, agriculture is still a very important part of the economy. About 35% of the workforce is in agriculture. That's from the FAO data of 2018. But we do need to move beyond just looking at what is the good that can be done in agriculture, but also to begin to address the risks in agri-food supply chains, in the operations, in the full supply chain, global land use, 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of freshwater use, right? In addition, in agriculture, for example, 2016, land conflict, there were about 700 land conflicts occurring involving agricultural commodities globally. And that comes from the Environmental Justice Atlas. They really track this work. Yeah? Worldwide, child labor is still an issue. We've made good strides in reducing child labor globally. That's a real positive. But unfortunately, there's still many millions of children working, and about 71% of child laborers are in the agricultural sector. So I think it's a sector we can't get away from this. We have to address these. And I think we have to admit as well that, this is again part of the issues that we want to look at, particularly in agriculture. The majority of child laborers are actually unpaid family members. Right? So there's again a nuance into how do you address these problems. So the challenges are there, and we know that business can really contribute to addressing and solving these challenges. We heard a lot about this as well this morning, on the issues of food security, livelihoods, integrating smallholder farmers, public health and safety, nutrition. Just another interesting data point here, about 1 out of every 9 people in the world is undernourished. So we've got the technology to produce food, but there's still a lot of undernourished people out there. There's issues of human rights, modern slavery in supply chains. We're going to talk a bit about that today. Child labor I mentioned, and then natural resources and environment. So a number of significant risks. And I just what we want to use the time today is to look at due diligence as an approach, as a tool. The OECD and FAO developed in 2016 a guidance on responsible agricultural supply chains. I think there are copies of this available, and if not, please let me know. This is the guidance. It took about 2 to 3 years to develop. We developed it together with policymakers, but also with business, workers, civil society, and other experts. There are still challenges. We've got the recommendations, but there's still challenges in the uptake and implementation. And I think that's what we want to really hear from our panel today, because they're on the ground and they're sort of on the front line, putting in place these recommendations. We did a recent study at the OECD, and we found that most companies, many leading companies in this sector, have sophisticated systems in place to track and monitor their supply chains. But there's still a need to move from commitments to actual actions, to actually addressing the underlying causes. And as we've heard, for many of these more complex problems, collaboration is really critical. We also know that on the NGO side, many of the complaints that NGOs raise or warnings that NGOs raise, we need to do better about making sure that those folks can raise complaints without fear of reprisal. There was just a study that came out last week that said at least 25% of the NGO community-led complaints included reprisals. And many of these reprisals occurred, again, in the agricultural sector. So it's not all about, there are some significant challenges we need to look at and address and face. I want this session to be constructive, so I would encourage everyone to ask your hard questions, but let's also be constructive, and let's see what we can do as a group to arrive at some of these, some solutions. From Thailand today, I'm very pleased that we have two excellent speakers. First, we have Dr. Namaporn Attaviroj, who's a Senior Standards Officer at the National Bureau of Agricultural Commodity and Food Standards. That's with the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperatives. Rice is an extremely important crop in Thailand. And Thailand has done a number of measures to assist rice farmers and also implement standards on rice production. But we'd want to hear as well on these different standards, and particularly on the some of the issues that surround the environment, labor in these standards. We also have, as Thailand also has a very strong and large fisheries and seafood industry. It employs, again, around 2 million people nationwide. And it's gone a transformation process. And Prad Kedpairoj, who's the Human Rights Manager within the Sustainable Development Department of Thai Union, will speak to us about his experience. Prad works on sustainability and innovation, notably in promoting safe and legal labor at Thai Union. So we really look forward to hearing from him. We also have speakers from international business companies, but who have deep experience in Asia. So I'm really, really pleased to have Bruce Blakeman here. Bruce is a Vice President with Corporate Affairs at Cargill. He's got extensive experience. He's based in Singapore, so he's not a foreigner coming in from outside. He's been actually in Asia. He mentioned to me he's been here for, what, over 20 years in Asia. 13 years with Cargill, so again, someone with deep, extended experience. And very interestingly, also worked with the, he was a Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Department of Commerce and served as Special Envoy to China in the early 2000s. So I'm sure you've a lot to speak to us about as well. We also have, at the far end, I'd say, of the supply chain on the food and beverage side, we have Jon Wyss joining us all the way from Switzerland today. Jon flew in this morning for this panel, so we'll forgive him if he needs some coffee at some point. Anyway, Jon is very involved with our work in the OECD FAO pilot on responsible supply chains, and he's the Senior Public Affairs Manager at Nestle. Also a long-time human rights specialist since, I'd say, what, almost 10 years, I'd say now, working in this area. He's also been very involved with the UN Human Rights Council and contributed to development of the UN framework for the guiding principles on business and human rights, so he's really rooted in this work. So welcome to you, Jon, as well. And Jon will also talk about different supply chains. Would love him to talk more about the complexity, I think, of the supply chain, particularly being further away from the production level. And then finally, we also have the voice of civil society, and I'm really pleased to welcome Sandra Cossard, who joins us from Sherpa, which is an NGO based in France. Sandra is an international lawyer, and she's the director of Sherpa. Sherpa works on addressing corporate liability for human rights violations. So Sandra is going to remind us of the challenges and what she's seen on the ground. And this is hard work. So, and at the OECD, we very much welcome this, all of us sitting around the table and let's say, how can we move the needle forward? How can we constructively move forward? Sandra has worked for many years with the European Parliament, with the Council of Europe. And again, I welcome and look forward to hearing her views of what she's seen, what works, what doesn't really work, and what's actually, where is there scope for improvement, all right? Right, so